Welcome to the Regenaissance Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Griggs. Visit www.theregenaissance.co to learn more. Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Griggs. I'm the host of the Regenaissance Podcast. And today, alongside me, I have Sam from Sweetwater Farm Ranch Co. Thank you for joining me.
Hey, Ryan. Thanks for having me on again. Hopefully the internet's a little more clear than it was last time. We learned about shutting off our Wi-Fi devices because we are at the end of the internet still. We might get Starlink. We're not sure. Hear good things. I know that you wanted to talk about a few things, one of them being the California Prop 12. So I don't know if you want to elaborate on that at all.
Yeah, well, so I guess for the listeners too, to hear Sam's backstory and everything that he's been doing, episode 25 of the Regenaissance Podcast, and then now we want to talk about a couple things, but more specifically, the first one would be California Prop 12. I don't know a whole lot, but I remember the first time I heard about this, it just came on my Twitter feed and pertaining to Iowa specifically. It was the new appointed Secretary of Ag, Brooke Rollins, talking with, I can't remember her name, and I don't know her position, but she was involved with the local politics in Iowa and how they're talking about Prop 12 and working together on that. And then I remember quickly Googling that actually had dealt with starting in California. So if you could, I guess, talk about it from your perspective, what exactly Prop 12 is, I think that'd be a great starting point.
And sorry for any background noise. My dad is trying to figure out what's going on with the accountant, and he's over there. But I'm going to say sorry ahead of time. We do have a lot going on here. We have a really small team. So the California Prop 12, great in theory, right? That got passed with people's kind of hearts behind the idea out in California. I know that California has a reputation of being like this crazy place with all this crazy stuff going on, and everybody thinks one way and blah, and that's just not true. California is super diverse. It's hugely agricultural. Most of the state is agriculture. But there's not a lot of pig stuff here, but we do a lot with poultry. So the big part of Prop 12 had to do with chicken housing to start. And then later on, the big pig guys, what are they, JBL, there's Smithfield, all those guys fought it in court forever, trying to prevent that law. And they said, oh, it's going to cost us billions and billions, and we'll never be able to do it. And that was all lies. They just didn't want to do it. They're still not doing it. So one of the big loopholes in the law is actually cooked foods. So cooked foods can be bacon, ham, anything smoked, depending on the classification. So the majority of the pig can still be sold in California and not be Prop 12 compliant. On top of that, there's not enough enforcement, and farms were able to self-certify, which is great, but there's still no way to enforce it. And so they're still not compliant, most of them. We were one of the first farms to become compliant. We were way past compliance. We were one of the first farms to certify for Prop 12, to the point where the CDFA was like, hey, we don't even need to come out this year and recertify you guys. You're so far ahead of the curve on what we're trying to do that we're just going to put your paperwork through because we have actual problem children that we're trying to narrow down. And we thought Prop 12 was going to be great for us. We thought it was going to make the price of pork more competitive for the little guy by making the big guys actually do the right thing for once. And that has not happened at all. The price is the same, and the big guys are so big that they can actually tank the market. So they can just take a loss on that product forever just to make sure that nobody who's doing it the right way can afford to operate. So we've actually seen the price of pork go down a lot. But then we have a specific use cases like with, I don't know, am I allowed to say Cisco? So there's a Cisco sales rep going through the Sierra Nevadas, and at the bottom of the Sierra Nevadas, his pork is $2.75 a pound, right? But as you start to go up the mountain, he's charging these guys more than we charge at $13, $14, $15 a pound, and he's blaming it on Prop 12. But it's the same guy with the same product that's not Prop 12 compliant, even though it's certified Prop 12 compliant, and he's just price gouging these guys. So they're actually making more money than they were making before. And it's really frustrating to deal with that.
So with California Prop 12, I know that's something that I've seen online recently, but truly I don't fully understand all of that. especially considering the clip that I saw of it was based in Iowa. So if you could just talk about what exactly is California Prop 12.
So California Prop 12 it's multifaceted. It's been around for about 8 years, mostly involving poultry and hogs and animal welfare standards related to housing and birthing. For hogs specifically, it has to do with the farrowing process that's really popular at major hog farms in Iowa and Nebraska and kind of the Midwestern type areas, where the sows basically spend their whole lives in these farrowing crates. Food comes by them, it's dropped right in front of them. They have piglets. They're injected with a shot and then immediately artificially inseminated again. So they're literally just birthing all the time. They never go outside. They never get to walk around. When they start to get old, they just put them on a truck and have them killed and made into ground pork. And then because of all the shots and stuff, there's actually needle allowments for metal in the pork because they hit them with so many shots so much, and the needles break off in the animals. I swear to God. So Prop 12 was an attempt to change that by requiring a larger farrowing pen, so at least the moms can move around and da-da-da-da-da. But the reason for the farrowing pens in the first place is because pigs that have been removed from their natural instincts have a tendency to crush a ton of babies, right? And we're so involved in those natural processes at this point on an industrial level, right? Not here at Sweetwater, but on an industrial level, that like the chickens, they're losing their natural ability to care for their own young. And it's basically been bred out of the populations because we're not breeding for mothering instincts. We're breeding for quick turnarounds, quick breeding, quick growth, ability to have lots of litters. We're not breeding for maternal instincts. So one thing that we've worked on here at Sweetwater, and it's cost us a lot of pigs, is figuring that process out to where we're selecting for traits in pigs that are going to be able to birth and raise their own piglets. One thing that we found is that first litter of piglets, you do have really high fatality rates typically, because she doesn't know what's going on. She doesn't know what piglets are. She doesn't know she's pregnant. But if you just let her learn that lesson, that by that second birth, you're losing almost none. And by the third birth, you're losing zero. But that's by nurturing those maternal instincts as part of a natural cycle, right? Versus interfering so much that now they don't even know what piglets are and they're just crushing their own and eating their own babies, right? Which is what's going on, which is the whole point of Prop 12, is to stop that practice. It has essentially been completely ineffective at stopping that practice, partially because they allowed for self-certification, and partially because the system's just so corrupt. The California Department of Food and Agriculture, the CDFA, has no ability to enforce this. It's so big. There's so many farms. It's so easy to launder in dirty pigs. If they get just one farm that's compliant, then they just say all the pigs are coming from that farm. And there's no way, there's no track and trace, there's no ability to verify anything. And so what that's actually done is tank the market even more because it pissed off the big guys. And so now they're selling pork at an even lower price to make sure that the people who now have to charge more because they're actually compliant are an even bigger price disadvantage. But the other side of that is that they're going around to certain clients and they are blaming Prop 12 and charging $13, $14, $15 a pound for something that still only costs them like 70 cents to make, and they're basically price gouging. So if anything, it's benefited the big meat packers more because there's no enforcement. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And that's such a shame. I mean, you brought up a lot of things that I want to talk about specifically with the pig industry, because where to start? So whenever I was vegan, one of the first things that kind of made me vegan was specifically the treatment towards pigs and what they're fed, because that is just, when you go down the rabbit hole of that, especially from CAFOs, and I've made posts on that on my social media to where there's actually a whistleblower, a guy who worked in the feedlots for some of the pigs, and he literally videotaped, you could see on the conveyor belt of just trash, literal trash full of just all kinds of garbage going up the chute to be chopped up for pig feed.
You
And
know, can I
then,
interrupt you 1 second there?
yeah,
You know how many people that I don't know that follow our farm sent us that video that you posted?
really?
Like at least 15 people, which is and the people I'd never seen before or talked to were like, "Oh my God, can you believe this?" And I was like, "Well, that you get what you pay for, you know, and
Yeah, but
that's the cost of cheap food."
yeah, and especially as with every industry in agriculture, I mean, that just got completely outsourced to where now Smithfield Foods, the largest pork producer, is not even American owned. And so this is why I'm so grateful to have you on. And for the listeners, again, going back to episode 25 to listen to his backstory, this is just such a massive issue with the California Prop 12 too, because now, again, something on the surface sounds so great, but it only benefits the big and powerful players. And it's very frustrating because it's already difficult enough to start a farm, but also maintain a farm if you're a small family farm or ranch. And so it's just kind of, it's sad. And that's again why I have this podcast, is for folks to really actually realize the severity of everything, but then also support the folks doing it the right way, such as yourself. So going back to the Prop 12, because again, I saw Brooke Rollins, Secretary of Ag, talking with somebody in the Iowa politics. Is there anything, I guess, where is Prop 12 currently in society? Is that still trying to be improved on, or making amendments on? Or, yeah, I guess from your perspective and everything
So
that you're going on with that.
So we actually started working with a group called, what is it, American Family Farms. It's basically one lady. She's kind of a lobbyist, kind of an advocate for animal welfare and small farmers. Her name's Donna. She's been really good to us as far as helping to promote us and just getting our feedbacks on things like Prop 12. And she actually worked with us on writing a letter that we're using as an op-ed to publish all over the state of California with different news outlets about Prop 12 and why it's important, as well as about the EATS Act. Are you familiar with the EATS Act at all?
I'm not.
So the EATS Act has to do with interstate food commerce, and it's an attempt to route around Prop 12, because even though those big packers are getting away with it right now, they know that they are at some point going to get caught up in what they're doing, and they're going to get big fines, and they're going to get shut down. Right. So that will come. It's not happening as fast as I would like. You know, to me, it's pretty simple, but I'm not a bureaucratic government person trying to catch billion-dollar operations cheating the law. But yeah, it's called the EATS Act. It's trying to make its way through Congress, and it's got a lot of support from like Smithfield and JBL and whoever else it is. Right. And basically, it would be a federal law that would basically make things like Prop 12 null and void on the argument of the Constitution, interstate commerce clause stuff, right? But you've got a bunch of technical issues there, because Prop 12 was actually voted on by the California, the citizens of the state of California, and put into a law. So it's not like a thing that the Senate did that can be easily repealed. Right. That's part of the reason California's messed up, is because we're able to do all these propositions and they sound great on paper, but the actual implementation is terrible and it ends up making stuff worse. That's how marijuana went legal in California, which was really great for like Philip Morris, but for all the little pot farm people that were actually revitalizing small communities by growing weed, which sounds crazy, but it was working really well. They all went out of business, and they were put out of business by big tobacco, who lobbied for that law. But every single person that smokes weed in California was like, "Oh, I want weed to be legal." And then it destroyed that whole part of that economy. That was actually like literally rebuilding towns out here that were rural, underserved communities. So there's a long history here with stuff like that. And basically, if I can just say anything about Prop 12, it's that the intentions are good. The enforcement will catch up. But if the EATS Act passes Congress on the federal level, that'll basically make it null and void, and it'll make it really hard for any other states trying to have improved animal welfare to do the same thing, right? It'll probably hurt raw milk. It'll hurt regenerative farming. It'll hurt all that kind of stuff. I think there's similar laws to Prop 12 in Virginia, Vermont, North Carolina, Massachusetts. I'm not 100% sure on that, but basically the EATS Act is very bad.
Yeah.
It sounds good, right? They make it sound good so that everybody wants to support it. But what it's going to do is undo all the work that voters nationwide have been doing to try to improve the food system through propositions like Prop 12 in California.
Damn. Okay.
Sorry about all that. I know that was probably a
No,
lot.
this just continues to show just how powerful these big conglomerates are. They can literally shift the market in their favor. I mean, it's just like what the media and other agencies do. They're very good at wordsmithing it to where the public thinks it's a good thing. But again, they just have so much power that. So,
Yeah.
well, that's also why I go with the podcast and everything, because the only reason why our food system, to me, has been able to get this way is out of sight, out of mind, with going back to the go big or get out. But it's just the fact that the knowledge and awareness has not been there. And the people in power are aware of that and they use that to their advantage. And that's why I think those days are slowly getting smaller because, for example, like this whole bird flu thing is huge. And it's another co-opted BS thing that's happening. But one great example I have of the power of social media and knowledge to where it's pushed back and worked. So there's this ostrich farm in Canada, and they almost had their whole entire 400 head of ostrich cold because of this bird flu thing. But then social media took a hold of it, and people were able to share about the truth of that online, and they applied so much pressure to where it was supposed to be cold at February 1st. And then it never ended up happening, and they actually didn't lose their whole flock. And I think that's going to start happening more and more. It's going to need a lot of effort, and that's why I'm transitioning to media for everything with Regenaissance, because it does work. It just takes a lot of work, and it takes people, we the people, to actually get behind something. And so that's why my hope with these next 4 years is people will get behind these things as it gets shared more and more online. I'm just curious then from your perspective, especially since it's almost been a full year since I've had you on this podcast. Have you seen, I'm just curious just from your perspective and just the culture and climate of where we're at with the whole Maha movement. Do you feel like it's headed in the right direction with our food? I know we're talking about Prop 12 and these big conglomerates, but
Well, so can I speak to all of that and a little bit of the history of how we got here? Because sitting on my front porch watching paint dry, sometimes I have a lot of time to think. With a few moments that I do get between the wife and the babies and the pigs and the customers. So if you think back, a century ago, the fastest way, and I think I heard you talking about this on a previous podcast, I'm not sure, but the fastest way to move food around was by train. And that's still, they would take it to the city and then it would be slaughtered there and distributed there, right? But as we've gotten these bigger systems over time, we've been able to consolidate it more and more. And at first that seemed like a good thing, right? Quality was still staying high. Family farmers were getting a fair price and you were able to just make that system more efficient. But as we've gone along, family farmers are getting paid not enough. They're not making enough money. The big packers are buying up or stifling out the competition to the point where it's like antitrust laws should probably be coming into play at some point. Like at some point, Smithfield Foods being owned by China is like a national security issue, right? But it got that way because it was simple and nobody had ever dealt with this before, right? It's not like this is something that human beings knew about that would happen. With the consolidated food system and the poor health and food safety, right? Like organic wasn't a thing because it had never had to be a thing until after World War II. And we started this big consolidated food system. So I think with the Maha movement and that kind of stuff, that is maybe a yearning, right? That people know something is wrong. They're not sure how to do it. They're not sure how to fix it. But they know there's a problem and they know that the kids are, look at me, I'm fat and I shouldn't be, right? I'm very active and I try to eat really healthy. But something is wrong and something is wrong with the food and we're going to have to work really hard to fix that. And part of that is, it's farmers markets and it's small farms and it's antitrust lawing the big food packers, right? And it's getting all those it's fixing the supply chain where, hey, we can still produce stuff locally and distribute it locally. And we need to get back into that mentality because yes, the food costs a little bit more, but I think there was a study out of Oregon, but 78-ish cents out of every dollar that's spent on a local protein product stays in that community for at least 12 months versus if they buy from Cisco, it's only 18 cents, right? So when you drive through and you see all these devastated abandoned towns that used to be beautiful, well, a big part of that is because all that money started getting sent to one centralized hub and leaving the community. So that's a thing that has to get addressed. And there's a million ways to address it. Farmers markets, buying direct from the farm, farmers going out and selling directly to restaurants, which is a lot of what we do. And a lot of that's only possible because of the internet. So that's one good thing the internet has done. You know, the internet has a lot of good things about it. It has a lot of bad things about it. But it's been revolutionary for small businesses, for little restaurants, for small farms. I mean, none of this stuff would have really been possible beforehand. And I think the Maha movement, I'm sure you're aware the whole administration is a lot. People feel a lot of ways about it. But I was very excited about the RFK thing, even though I think he's a little bit of a nutter. I think that he has some really good points. And I think that he's asking some tough questions. And I think that his heart is in the right place when it comes to the health of the average person. And I think that they are going to start making a lot of headway once they start getting real answers out of everything under Health and Human Services. But I don't think you can start implementing solutions until you actually know what the problems are. And I think for so long, the big food packers and the whatever companies and Philip Morris have been paying to alter studies and do whatever to prevent that information from being forthcoming or whatever.
So before moving to the Philip Morris thing, you bring up a great point just on like the whole antitrust thing. I don't know, it's just mind-boggling to me with America, the rich history of America, even though it's only a couple hundred years old, but especially in the context of farming and ranching, the Great Plains had some of the best farmland in the world, major for cattle, with the whole bison too. But yet our largest pork producers, Chinese owned, like that in itself is just so mind-boggling stupid that was allowed and still is allowed. And like I obviously have no idea what is behind closed doors, but the fact that exists is just mind-boggling to me.
Well, I how that was ever allowed to be, because things like that, right? I think they have to go through a congressional approval process because they're so big. I could be wrong on that, but the fact that it's not discussed on a national level where it is on the verge of being a national security issue. I mean, the Chinese government owns some incredible amount of farmland, and it's only around military installations.
Yep.
So I'm not a scientist or whatever, but I'm pretty sure they're not buying that up out of the goodness of their hearts, you know.
Well, it's also just the fact to me why the hell any large food producers in America, every single one should be American owned. To me, that should be just the default. You think that would be common sense in the fact that you're producing food for your country, it should be owned by your countrymen essentially. Yeah, but I want to transition then to the whole Philip Morris stuff, because I actually don't know about that. If you could talk more on, because you said that with him and the studies.
Well, Philip Morris is Marlboro, right?
Oh,
that's a tobacco company, but they've been investing in the food system since the 80s when people started to realize that cigarettes were bad for them, which is a wild thing that I can't believe. And as a smoker, that I can't believe nobody was able to figure out for 300 years or whatever. And like, obviously it's bad for you, but it feels great if you're having a drink with it. But people started buying less cigarettes. Less people were smoking. Laws were starting to come into effect. So they started buying more access to the food system. And they actually owned, I think, major parts of food production in America. And there's a whole thing you can go down on that. But they're huge. If it's bad for people, chances are Philip Morris is involved because they've made literal fortunes over and over and over again on making products that are addictive, regardless of the health consequences, right? So that they had a major play in the change in American food to make all the sugary addictive foods for kids. And that's my understanding, but I'm no expert on it.
No, now you mentioned that. I didn't realize you meant like the tobacco. I thought you just said something about Philip Morris. I didn't put two and two together because I haven't actually not. I need to do that. Go down the rabbit hole of that because I've heard that a lot. Is the tobacco companies, especially at that time, use their funds to fund research and other things to co-op all that and then started selling highly addictive products. Because that's what going to just as just a side note too, because I started learning on just the whole seed oil conversation, because that's another topic of trying to understand, is it really bad? What are the root problems with seed oils? And one thing I found, I don't know the two names off the top of my head, but so the linoleic acid found in seed oils, when that's heated up, like it's heated up repeatedly for say fried foods, that's converted to these two compounds commonly found in weed. And so when you think about that and how with weed, there's the whole munchie saying to where your brain is literally fried, but it co-opts your brain into thinking that you're far hungrier than you are. And then that's why you overeat. And if you have those two compounds with seed oils, that makes a whole lot of sense, because seed oils, there's evidence to suggest that it leads to overconsumption. And that makes so much sense now, learning about those two compounds, because it's literally changing our brain to signal to us that we're still hungry, even though we're not.
So to tie back into the whole Maha thing, right? I think that has a lot to do with why people get so addicted to cheap fast food.
Oh yeah.
When it looks terrible, it smells awful, but the people who eat it all the time think it's great, and they always have a craving for it. And I get it. I 100% I get it, but I didn't know that. There may be something to that, and that might be one of those things that's where that Maha update on Health and Human Services, that's the real kind of data that I think they're going to be chasing, where it's no longer some crazy guys on the internet who found this loophole that they think is related. It's they're actually going to go in and get the real data and say, hey, this stuff is addictive, and this is why, because it shares this chemical property with marijuana. And I wouldn't be surprised if the companies making that food have known that for 40 or 50 years.
Oh, definitely.
That's exactly why they're doing it, right? So I would not be surprised by that at all. I'm very excited about the Maha thing. I think that it's going to lead to some good stuff down the road, but like all things with the government, it's going to take a long time. It took a long time to get here. It's going to take a long time to start going in the other direction. And it could be in 4 years, they could make all this great progress and there's an administration change and we're back to normal, right? So I hope that's not the case. I hope that we keep moving in the positive direction of healthy food. But who's really to say?
It might. Well, it's already slowly transitioning into the restaurant field. And I think it's a good segue for that. Because True Food Kitchen, for example, they were the first chain to announce that they're 100% seed oil free. And then Steak and Shake mentioning how they're going to be using 100% tallow for their fries. And they've also made it clear that they're not using any of the additives, preservatives that you can be found in other restaurant-based tallow. So with you, because you mentioned that you work with a lot of restaurants, I guess the first question would be, what made you want to work? Because from a farm and ranch, there's plenty of options, I guess, to choose from, to where you're selling a grocery store or selling it directly to customers via farm herd shares, farmers markets. They could visit the farm, or another avenue is what you take is also restaurants.
So I think that for most small farms, the way we do it, where we market directly to restaurants, is very unrealistic. We're kind of in a golden spot here in California, where we're located between two major metropolitan areas. We have the high traffic, foot traffic in our local. I mean, we're in the same county as the Yosemite National Park, right? So we're seeing a huge trend in this area towards healthy food. A lot of that is the work of organizations like yours, right? And there's so many of them, but just educating people on the importance of healthy food and then wanting to see it. And what we're actually seeing is we're seeing restaurants become the ones that are switching to farm to fork are thriving. The ones that are trying to use the older model and buying everything from Cisco are dying. They're not dying fast, but they're dying and they're closing up. And so a bunch of them are scrambling to become more farm to fork over the last maybe 18 months as they realize that, hey, dude, you can get the same crappy burger at this place and this place and this place and this place. So there's nothing setting them apart in the market. So what we bring them is a product that's, hey, this is a premium product. It's from Central California. It's clean. There's no hormones, no antibiotics, no GMOs. You get to, like you always say, shake your farmer or rancher's hand, right? Believe it or not, the chefs love that stuff, because they never get that. And we just got to go eat at CAFOs in San Francisco, and we were asked to eat there by the chef, and me and my wife went, and we had a lovely dinner. And they were so happy, and it's a huge restaurant. I mean, I think it's a 60-day waiting period to get a table, right? They're hugely successful. But they wanted us to come eat there because most of the farmers and ranchers, even the ones, and they try to buy direct, right, don't come and eat there. We had the same thing at the Octavia back in August. They really wanted us to come eat. It was my wife's birthday. I was like, hey guys, can we get a table? We had a wonderful experience, and you could tell it was as fun for us as it was for them because they never get to do that. They never meet the people making the food. So that's been a big boon for us. And I think that there's going to be more trending about that kind of stuff nationwide. Like I said, we're very lucky here in California, where we're located too.
You bring up I just want to interrupt real quick there because you bring up a good point I've never even really thought about, because my whole focus has been, shaking your ranchers and farmers' hand and going there, but I didn't even think about it from the perspective of a chef or just a restaurant owner. They've been also been buying not locally at all. So just adding to the connection to that piece too is really cool, thinking long term about how more and more restaurants will have actual relationships with the farmers and ranchers that are producing the food. So that's a cool tidbit.
And I'm not trying to discourage anybody from going out and meeting with your restaurant, right? You want to work on your ICP, your ideal customer profile. You're going to want a restaurant that's claiming to be farm to fork or that has a higher end or that you're really good buddies with them or whatever, right? Because most of them aren't going to want to do it, they're not going to be able to afford to do it, or it's going to be weird. So there's huge barriers to selling directly to a restaurant. But I think the more people go out and do it, the more normal it becomes and the more excited they get to do it, because even if it's just one restaurant, right, eventually it becomes 3 and then it's 5 and then it's 12 and then everybody wants to do it. And then now the Chamber of Commerce is putting on farm to fork dinners and events, right, where they're promoting the restaurants that do that. And now those restaurants are thriving. So it starts to have a cascading effect over time. And I think it's something that as a farmer and rancher, we have a certain level of responsibility in the repairing of the food system to go and meet with the chefs and the owners of these restaurants and to have those conversations. And they're going to reject you more times than you make it through the door. But eventually, especially with the way things seem to be trending, it's going to get easier and easier to do. And more of them are going to want to do it. And that's a way where you're getting that product to that end consumer right away. And the value that we provide by working with these guys is we have a great story that they can tell their customers. We're delivering them a great product that they've never even seen before. I mean, we have a Greasy Spoon Diner down the street here, and I've been trying to get her to buy forever, right? Forever. She's so busy. And she finally called me the other day, and I went in and met with her. And we had to negotiate the prices a little bit because we're 3 times what she's paying from Cisco. But almost immediately, she's selling 3 times the number of pork chops that she was selling before, because they're just better. They're so much better.
Yep.
And so so I think that stuff's going to start happening more and more. I would encourage any farmer ranch to reach out to your local restaurants and start figuring out how to do that. It's easy money, kind of. It's a quick turnaround on your products. It's getting your brand out there. It's giving the restaurants a cool product to use that keeps people coming back into their restaurant and helps them be successful. It's part of that retaining that 78 cents on that dollar that allows you to hire another person. And direct to consumer, for instance, is an area where we are really weak. We're really trying to figure out how to improve that. We might do 12 or 15 direct to consumer orders a month, and we need to be doing 150. If we had if we had 100 people who spent $100 a month with the ranch, we'd be able to hire a full-time delivery driver. We'd be able to get a new delivery vehicle, like a proper refrigerated van. And so that's something we're trying to polish up. And just from a diversity standpoint as a ranch, having several avenues, having a couple grocery stores that you work with, having a few restaurants that you work with, having your direct to consumer. If something happens to one, you're not totally messed up, right? And right now we're in a bad situation because if something happens and there's an issue in the food service industry and these guys start dropping, like all their prices went up because of inflation, and we started seeing a lot of our orders going down, right? And we're too dependent on restaurants. Not that I don't love every one of those relationships, not that it's so cool to go by the little bakery with my wife and get a ham and cheese sandwich that's got our ham in it. That stuff's awesome. But I think diversification is key to having a successful farm and ranch. And I would encourage everybody to go out and shake their chef's hand, right? Meet the chef, meet the owner. If they don't want to buy from you now, they'll buy from you sometime, even if it's just to buy a special to try, right? Chances are they'll do it. And once they start doing it and they start getting feedback from their customers, you'll start seeing them buying more and more. And then you start to have that circular relationship, just like you have with direct to consumer.
This whole piece that you just talked about, out of any podcast episode I've done so far, really is a great example of just showing what it's like to be a farmer with restaurants too. Because hearing how she was really receptive, or not here, I guess hearing her responses and her pushback in the sense that saying it's 3 times as costly as rather than the Cisco stuff, which is very easy to understand because as a restaurant, it's the margins are very slim, and I think it's 75% of restaurants that open within 5 years closes down. It's an insane statistic. But then from your perspective, it's trying to get them to understand that the product that you have is incredible and actually tastes good and nourishes, which is whenever you said that as soon as she accepted, she's been able to sell more. And so this is just a great example of showing how difficult this whole situation really is, but also kind of the light at the end of the tunnel is the fact that there is more farm to fork happening because the consumers are starting to actually taste these products and realize, I mean, for me, for example, I remember the first time I had farm fresh food when I was 27, realizing, holy shit, I've never had this from a grocery store. And so I know that's happening over and over again with consumers, but that's also happening more in restaurants. But then from like an owner standpoint, she's seeing that value too, because it's a massive risk and leap to take that on just for one simple product like pork. But then also, lastly, is just hearing about the relationship that you're building yourself with her over time. It's just a great way to show how it actually is behind the scenes. So thank you for sharing that. I guess the last thing. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. And you know what? It builds for them also. It builds something in their customer's mind, right? Hey, I went here and I had this wonderful experience, and these guys are buying from the farm that's a mile down the road from us, and that's so cool. And on and on and on and on. And so what starts to happen for the restaurant is people go and they brag to their friends, and then they go back and they have it again and they have it again and they have it again, because they can't it's a new experience, right? It's not just getting the same old ham steak or the same beef fillet, right? And so that's a huge part of that for them, but it's overcoming that barrier because it's 3 times the cost. It looks like a huge investment, and they're going, well, everyone knows about premium beef, right? But in everyone's mind, pork sucks. And so it's this, why am I going to spend all this extra money on this pork just for it to not work? And the truth is, I know it works. I do it all the time, right? But for this restaurant owner or this chef, they don't know that's going to happen. And it could be their business or their job, their career on the line by choosing to spend 3 times more money on a product with me. So I have to be very good at demonstrating that value and showing use cases where it works, right? And then letting them try out a sample first and then another sample. And I call it a hand holding period, but it's a little bit of just helping them learn that, hey, this works really well. It helps you increase client retention. And even if your margins are even a little bit tighter on this than they would normally be, you're going to have more volume, and you're going to build a reputation that's going to keep customers coming back and expecting and loving your restaurant, right?
I guess with that then, because a lot of talk, especially for farmers and ranchers, that is direct to consumer. Because I haven't talked really a whole lot about direct to, I guess, restaurants.
Well, not
What?
most places don't do it, right? That's where I was like, we're in a golden area where we're probably the heart of that happening in America, or one of the hearts where restaurants want to do it. They don't know how to do it. So we're able to be part of that process. I think that's going to spread nationwide. So sorry for interrupting you there, but
No,
it's a new thing that I think is going to continue to spread, especially the more farms we get nationwide that are trying to do it, right?
What would you then recommend for a farmer or rancher to make that first step? Because say they've been used to doing farmers markets or direct consumer the whole time, and now they might be interested in this part.
I don't know what it's called. Hey, Kenny, do you know what it's called? That helmet that boxers wear when they get punched in the face?
Protection gear.
Whatever. He said it's protection gear, but you know the little helmet with the little padding?
Yeah.
I would put on your figurative one of those and just go out there and get your butt kicked, because you're going to get your butt kicked every day. And then there's logistics issues where restaurants are used to Cisco, and they can get 1,000 of an item in a row and never run out and never not get it. Right. But I'm like, I have 70 tenderloins a month to sell and only 70, and the restaurant needs 150. How do I solve that problem? Right. So you have to get punched in the face a lot. You have to know that you're going to mess up. You have to know that you're going to lose. You're going to have people say yes and then not want to work with you because you can't produce enough. But the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. And you'll find that those, just like the direct consumer relationships, are incredibly rewarding for you. They're rewarding for the staff at the restaurant. They're rewarding for the end customer. And it's a really awesome process to be a part of.
Can you give an example, I guess, of a success story with because I know you mentioned a couple of times to where you went with your wife to go visit. I would just love to hear a story from, I guess, the beginning to now you're working together with them.
See, what's a good one, Kenny? Sorry, my business partner, he's coming on his lunch.
Hey, Kenny.
I think that
I think the biggest.
What's the best success story we have where it was the most against the odds? I would say the CAFOs account.
Yeah, the CAFOs.
That's probably our biggest success story, because they're kind of a franchise in San Francisco, but not really. So they have a CAFOs broader name, but then it spreads out between different facilities. But they started out with one, and I never thought we were going to get the account. And I showed up there on a random Tuesday with a clipboard. It was pouring rain, and I had said vaguely that we might come by this week. And I was just used to, right, I had that protective helmet on. I was just used to getting punched in the face every time I went into a restaurant. And I walked in and I sat down, and they were like, hey, how much of this do you have? How much of this do you have? How much of this do you have? And I was blown away by how receptive they were. But over time, that relationship has gone from, hey, they were buying this and this, and now they're buying a ridiculous number of items of random use cases and using it all through their whole chain, right? Through all their different locations. They have us drop off at one location. They do all the prep. And then they distribute it out. And that's been a huge success. But that success was only possible because I went out and got beat up so much that I was just so used to getting my ass kicked that I just went in and I did my best, and I wasn't scared to fail, and they wanted to work with us. Another one is the Octavia. So whenever we meet with the new restaurant, I bring samples of terrible products, whatever the worst things that are selling badly are. That's what I bring. So a lot of times it's feet and tails, and it might be a pork chop, and it might be this, right? No premium stuff is going in this box. And I think I brought them like one pork chop and a copa roast. And I dropped it off. And before I had even gotten to my next stop, they were texting me on the phone, telling me how amazing that pork chop was and that they wanted to get 80 a week for the next 4 weeks. And I was just mind blown by that. And all they did was salt and butter it. And now we have a great relationship with them. They buy bones and feet and all the other stuff that we have such a hard time selling. Anytime I have anything extra, I call those guys and they use it in their restaurant, and they've become kind of legendary for it, you know? And they were already a great restaurant, like,
Yeah.
but now their pork is all coming from us, and it does really well for them. And they're oftentimes ordering double over what we can produce. And they're not holding it against us. And we've built up that really good personal relationship with them and Che Fico and a bunch of these other restaurants throughout Central California.
That's really cool. And that makes me think about how there's definitely an opportunity moving forward. I mean, depends upon where you're at and, you know, the supply that the restaurant's able to get. But I feel like this brings a whole new side of restaurants to use unwanted or unpopular cuts to fuse that into a really good dish, because that's another awesome thing that I've personally learned since doing this whole journey 4 years ago is some of the food I've had from cuts that I would have thought is just so disgusting is so good. But then also in terms of like talking about feet and bones and whatnot, turning that into stews for the fall. And I'm really curious to see how that plays out in the future too, is the type of food available and the type of dishes that are prepared. If
So
it's
can I
going,
speak?
yeah,
Can I speak to that for a second? Sorry.
no,
So
you're
one
good.
thing is that most of these restaurants and chefs, they are not used to farms and ranches coming in and talking to them directly. They're used to working with a distributor, even if it's a high-end distributor, right? It's it's not something they're used to seeing, and it's something that, especially once they get their feet wet with it, that they love doing. And I think you're going to start to see more and more of that as we go forward. I see the restaurants that are being successful are moving in that direction of buying directly from the farm or ranch. And the restaurants that are struggling are doing the same old thing and getting it from the Cisco's and the US Foods of the world. And I think the more farmers and ranchers start approaching restaurants, then the more normal that becomes, the more cool food stuff you're going to see. And you're going to start to see a lot of positive downstream effects from that, right?
Yeah. And I guess above all else too, I just hope that I know like the ancestral word gets thrown out a lot, but whenever I worked on the farm and used a lot of, especially in like bones and like chicken feet and all that stuff that I personally never had exposure to at all growing up, and you know, thinking that it's kind of gross, but then actually trying the food. But then not just that, I actually learned about the nutrient density of a lot of this. It's incredible. And so again, going back to the whole Maha stuff, but then also with just the whole restaurant culture, because now that's slowly but quickly at the same time shifting. I really think that in 10 years, 20 years time, just a lot of common dishes that we have now, or I should say then, won't be. I'm not, my brain is so scrambled right now. I'm trying to rephrase this. The dishes that might be popular in 10 to 20 years times could be dishes that not only were not popular, but a lot of us had never even had. Geez, that took forever just to say that.
No, and I I think no worries, I won't hold it against you. But I think you're right, and I think that there's a little bit of that happening right now. And I think the farther we get down that road, the more the customer who's dining out is going to expect to see that, the more of that you're going to see. And the more farms and ranches you go out, the more you're going to see that. And you're already seeing it, people doing it at home, right? And also, I will say that we sell blocks of fat. We can't find anyone to make lard. Lard has died out so much that there's no one that can make lard out of the fat for us, which really sucks. No, we cannot find a single one. The meat processors won't do it. We're starting a salumi program, which is really fun, and I love it, and it's great. But the guys that do that for us won't do it. We cannot find a meat processor that can make lard or tallow. Granted, we're pigs, so it's all lard. But what I do is I take the block of fat and I put it in. It's a 2-pound block of fat, and I put it in my slow cooker, right? And I let it cook off for a day, and then I go in there with a spoon when it's all good and oily, and any skin or anything that was in that block of fat, throw that out for the dogs. And then I put it in the dog food bowl. And then I take the rest of it and I put a jar in the sink, and I run a bunch of hot water through it so that it doesn't crack. And then I dump all the water out. I dry it out quick with a rag, and then I fill it with the oil out of the slow cooker. And I use that to cook with the lard from the pigs here. And we have a bunch of older folks that are customers will buy fat and do exactly that, but they're coming from a time period where they grew up cooking with lard.
Yeah.
Right. And they miss cooking with lard, and they're so happy that we can provide a way for them to do that. I think you're going to start seeing more of that stuff. But if you've ever had a fried egg cooked in pig lard, like clean, real pig lard versus a fried egg cooked in seed oil, it's a totally different animal. It's so good.
I've never tried it with lard. That's actually, so I'm curious then why, especially with where you're at geographically, why has it been damn near impossible to find somebody to help with making lard?
I mean, I'm sure that 50 years ago, right, there was a ton of operations that could do it. But none of the restaurants cook with lard. And the ones that do are buying fat and making it in-house for the same reason, because they can't buy it anywhere. Which we have restaurants that buy the pig fat from us to make lard, right? They would probably, a lot of them would probably rather just buy the lard, but they can't because we can't get it turned into lard. So we have to sell them the raw fat. And I think that's just as a result of market effects, right? When everyone switched to seed oils because they were super cheap, people stopped using lard. Then there were less and less people that ran operations that just made lard. And the businesses and the butchers that were doing it stopped doing it because people weren't buying it. And now you're at a point where nobody does it at all. There might be one massive industrial factory that does it, but they're probably doing 100,000 pounds of it at once, right? Or whatever. Whereas our 200 pounds every 3 months of pig fat that we keep to make lard with, as we sell out of it, they're not even going to pick up the phone for that, you know? So
Yeah.
we're hoping that as this whole movement grows, and we're seeing it already of smaller butchers that are wanting to start that process up, we're hoping that there starts to be more businesses opening or USDA spec butchers expanding into making lard as the consumer market for it continues to grow. And I will say that cooking with pig lard it's awesome. I think it's way better than even olive oil, which is a way better real olive oil, which is a way better alternative than seed oils for cooking.
I need to get some good lard then, because I typically cook in tallow, but I've never really, I've eaten a lot of pork, but I've never actually cooked with lard.
Well, where are you at, man?
I'm in Austin, which I can get it. No, I can definitely get it. It's just I've always been, I guess I've just been so used to cooking with tallow now to where I've just never thought to give the chance for lard. And I've also
Texas is as far as we ship east, and we were actually talking this morning about shipping my cousin some dog treats for her dog. We sell some of those raw parts.
Yeah.
Some people like to eat them. We usually feed them to the ranch dogs. We actually had a dog. She's like 13. She like reversed aged with the raw treats, which was pretty incredible. But if you want, we could ship you some fat and stuff to actually try.
Oh yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind at all.
Cool. Well, then I guess the last questions I really have then is still going on to the topic of restaurants too, because COVID changed a lot with restaurants in particular. It decimated small family restaurants, and thinking about just the economics too, because that's another thing I try to do my best to get folks to think about. Like, for example, I made a tweet of people will not bat an eye paying, say, $3.50 for a 12-ounce Red Bull, but then thinking about buying a gallon of raw milk for $20 will just make them go crazy. But then in the context of restaurants, the whole reason why I pretty much have stopped eating out, besides a couple places in Austin, because a lot of it is just using cheap cut seed oils, but then you're still paying what feels like a premium for a product that I can cook at home that tastes even better. So I guess where from because I know California is also a lot different than Texas and elsewhere. Do you see an actual viable path for the whole farm to fork movement in restaurants?
So I will say, as someone who's lived in California and Texas, that I learned to say that in Texas. I know the Texans will kill me the next time I come into the state, but they're really not that different. You have massive rural agricultural agrarian communities spread out all over Texas and California, and then you have a few major population centers. So in Texas, you have Austin, San Antonio, and Dallas would be and El Paso are huge ones, right? In California, you have LA, San Francisco, Sacramento, San Diego are kind of your really, really big ones. I think that you're going to start to see more and more of it nationwide. And I think that a part of the reason it hasn't been such a thing is because you have that megalithic monster that is Cisco and US Foods to compete with, right? Versus when you're doing direct to consumer, those guys already, they're not buying from Cisco and US Foods. They're just buying from you instead of the grocery store, which is awesome. And I wish I had more people that did that. But as far as the restaurant side of it goes, the more conversations you have with the people that own the restaurants, or if you're a chef or you own a restaurant, there's a farm nearby you that is probably would love to work with a restaurant and is scared and doesn't know how. I think that the more it starts happening, the easier it's going to get, because right now it's a novelty, right? But it's such a great thing. And the restaurants that do it are doing so well because of it, that I think as things continue to trend in that direction, it's going to be easier and easier to do as it becomes more and more normalized. But the only way it's going to get normalized is by going out and having those conversations and meeting those people. And on both sides, right? Farmers and ranchers saying, hey, your restaurant might not be a good fit for us because you need so much of this. And restaurants saying, hey, I know you only have so much of this, but we could do a little bit, we could do this once a month, and we could do this once a month, and learning that different way of sourcing products. Because the other side of that issue is Cisco and US Foods make it so easy. They have everything. They have massive incentives. One actual example of that is there's a Farm to Fork restaurant in Sacramento, and they're awesome. And the chef is awesome, but it's owned by a larger restaurant group. Now, this whole restaurant group's whole thing is Farm to Fork. These people actually started Farm to Fork in the Sacramento area. They're huge proponents of it. They've been promoting it like crazy. And then you have the Cisco reps that are in their ears, and by the same people, also the same people that own Olive Garden, which I'm like, dude, why would your boss be taking advice on how to run his Michelin star restaurant from the guys that own Olive Garden? But we both kind of made that face. So, but what they're doing, right, is they're telling his boss, oh no, your quality won't go down, and we still have Farm to Fork products. And if you buy only from us, then we'll give you these huge price breaks and you guys will make more money, because they're trying to expand to even more restaurants. But he had to have a sit down with his boss and go, dude, you can't do that. We're not Olive Garden. Each restaurant in our little family here is a Farm to Fork thing. They're all unique. They all source from different farms and ranches. And to consolidate all of that to Cisco, yeah, we're going to have to buy stuff from Cisco, right? We're going to need napkins and toiletries and certain things that only Cisco is going to be able to provide, right? But as far as our main protein courses and a lot of our food, we get that locally now, and there's no way that Cisco will ever do that for us. And you're gonna kill the restaurants. You're going to kill them all. And then I thought it was kind of funny because we told him, hey, if you hit X, we'll give you a minute. We'll give you a discount. And he's like, well, what's the minimum? I was like, well, $5,000 a month would be great. He's like, done. I was like, whoa, calm down. Calm down. I was just fucking with you. So we worked out a better price, but he wanted to hit that minimum just because he had that conversation with his boss, the larger owner of the restaurant group, that upset him, right? And I don't know. I don't even know where did we start on that?
It was just talking on just the price, just the economics of the Farm to Fork, I guess, movement, and if this is going to be a viable just path moving forward.
I think it is very viable. I think that there's a lot of energy behind it, and I think that there's battles that are going to have to get fought by the chefs and the restaurant owners and the farmers and the ranchers, and learning to work together, because the other side of that is you have a vast political divide sometimes between what a rancher is thinking and what a chef is thinking, right? You get two very different groups of people here. But I think that one thing that unites everybody is food. Everybody wants good, clean, healthy, real food. Everybody wants their businesses to be successful. Everybody wants their kids to be healthy and in a clean house. And so I think part of the conversation too is just focusing more on what we have in common. And I think that's already happening. And I think that is a viable path. And I think the more people do it, the more normal it's going to become. And I think we're going to start to see our economy in the restaurant industry become more farm to fork nationwide.
I hope so. I'm really curious to see what happens because I think it can work, but I have no idea with that. Only time will tell. I think the cool thing, though, is the fact that it's trending in that direction. Because, like I was saying, with True Food, that was really cool to see. I know Sweet Green, they're pretty much going towards that too. So I know slowly but surely more especially chains, I think, will do that. It's just really interesting with like the whole Cisco thing. And just as a whole in America on just the whole efficiency aspect most folks just don't realize how fragile the whole system is. It's insane to have a year-round menu and have it all fully in stock every single day. I mean, it's just kind of like going to a grocery store. You expect everything to be in stock. That's the same thing with a restaurant. It's very fickle.
So back to one thing that might have come out of COVID was restaurants no longer, and stores and people, but restaurants weren't able to get things like that anymore. So they had to start getting creative, which led to them changing their menus more. And that led to the local farmer at the farmer's markets now getting a phone call because they need X product and they can't get it. And I know at least in California, there was a lot of that. And that's what's leading, I think, to the big change that's happening here right now. I can't speak for the rest of the country, but I do know that a lot of the farm to fork momentum is coming out of those changes that happened because COVID forced those changes to happen.
It's a good point. I didn't even think about that, and that does make sense to me. Yeah, I don't have anything else to add. I thought I did. I guess with that, then, I don't know if you have any other comments or questions to add.
Not on that topic. I would like to add that I'm really hoping with the MAHA movement thing and the USDA that the USDA and the Farm Servicing Agency, the FSA, I really hope that they're able to go through those agencies and make them more efficient and that we stop subsidizing these CAFOs, which I know you've spoken at length about CAFOs many times. CAFOs are horrible for the environment, for the people, for the animals. They're just bad. And I hope that we restructure stuff to make it more accessible to small farms and ranches, because every once in a while I hear some guy somewhere saying, well, no number of millennials with little tiny hobby farms is going to feed America. And it's like, okay, well, we were feeding America with 20-acre homesteads for the first 400 years that people were moving into the North and South America. We didn't have this huge farm system, so obviously we can. I think that's the direction that it's going to move in. And when I hear people say stuff like that, it just motivates me even more to work towards this, because I'm like, it's totally doable.
Yep.
It's just not something you want to do. And so you're going to talk down to people that are doing it. Whereas I'm not trying to talk down to you. I believe in what I'm doing. I'm not going to talk down on your way of doing things. I'm going to say, hey, I think maybe it would be a good idea this is what the direction things are moving in. But, I'll just let our success kind of show that path. Right. I had this conversation with somebody the other day, and that's that I don't argue with the other regenerative farm that's 2 miles down the road from me, because everything that they're doing is awesome. And everything that they're doing helps educate more people and helps bring me more business, right? I'm not fighting with them because they're also a regenerative farm. I want them to do well, just like I want me to do well, because there's plenty of room for all of us. And those are kind of the last things I got, man.
No, I agree on the whole. I'm really curious to see what happens with the whole structure with the corn, wheat, and soy subsidies, and the fact that a lot of that's just turned into fuel, and all of that's just unnecessary, and that just puts a huge stranglehold on everything with
No,
agriculture.
I think that stuff needs to go away.
Yeah,
If I could cut anything, it would be agricultural subsidies. Make those guys compete in a fair market, right? That's why raw milk costs what it costs. That's why our pork costs what it costs.
yeah,
We're not getting a handout to artificially reduce the price of our products, right? And that when it goes back into financing, we get beaten up all day. We've had 20 potential loan packages. Any one of them would have allowed us to grow faster, do more, and every single time it starts here, and then they do this, and then it gets cut down, and then it gets cut down, and then we were able to do a little bit, and then they're like, well, you guys really should be doing more, and we're like, right, well, had you given us the package that we asked for in the first place, we would have been able to do all those things. That's
yeah,
why it's taken us 5 years. We're going to finally start touring in May, but it's taken us 5 years to get to the point where we have built enough pastures and have enough animals and have been able to clean up the 170 years worth of stuff laying on the ground enough that we can tour the place. 5 years ago, this was just my yard. Now people want to come walk around at it and look. And that took me a little bit of personal growth, right? To get used to that idea. It's taken a lot of work to get to the point where it's something we're proud to show off, and we're still not even going to be close, but we have so many requests for it that we're finally going to be doing it. And the financing for small farms and ranches is a nightmare. And I would like to, that's something I hope changes. Because if we were just putting up a pig barn, right, it would be no problem. We would get all the money we ever wanted to do that. But when we're like, oh, we're just letting them walk around outside and eat acorns, they're like, whoa, that's crazy. Pigs don't do that. And you're like, I don't know if you've heard of the wild boar problem that we have in America, but I'm pretty sure pigs do just fine outside.
yeah.
Right. So I'm hoping that there can be some restructuring there that encourages people to do regenerative farming and ranching, whether it's small or it's big, and that the markets continue to trend towards sourcing directly from farms, because that creates jobs. It retains capital for communities. It improves quality of life for the people eating at the restaurant, for the people buying direct to consumer, for the farmer and rancher. It's a good thing all the way around, and I think it's going to keep going that way. Especially, that's the most hopeful thing I have is I think that RFK is highly motivated to get that stuff done.
Yeah, and I will add too. I think that is also trending in the right direction because, like, for example, I had his name is Brandon Welsh from Mad Capital on my podcast, and they work specifically with regenerative organic farms and ranches for financing. So I hope that there's more like him in that company that prop up, because there are so many people that are waking up to everything that's happening in our food system. And like, take for Bitcoiners, for example, they are a very motivated bunch. My hope is for the folks that don't want to ranch themselves, but say they might have capital, that there's ways to work together on this long term. But then I also can foresee problems like what you just described, to where the people are talking out of their ass towards the farmer and rancher and telling them how to go about their operation whenever they've never even visited a farm, yet alone worked on one. So, but to me, it always, again, comes down to communication and awareness. And that's why that's my whole focus, is those two things
I think there's a long way to go, but I think it's changing in that direction. And another reason why I'd encourage farmers and ranchers to reach out to restaurants is because that restaurant touches more people every month than most farms and ranches could ever dream of. So just by having your products there as an option, you're starting to make more people aware that is an option, right? And that's how you start building awareness, because I think the farm to fork thing for restaurants is well underway. At least it is in California. I think it's trending that way nationally. I think that direct consumer from farms and ranches is growing substantially. And I see it an incredible effort from U.S. Foods and Cisco and other major distributors to pretend to be doing that to retain customers, right? But they can only pretend to do that for so long, right? My products smoke U.S. Foods and Cisco out of the water. They don't have a chance side by side. So the only place they can do it is by pretending and being cheaper. That's it. At the end of the day, it shines through. Those personal relationships shine through, and I think that's going to continue to grow that movement. And we're just excited that we get to do this for a living, even if we don't make a lot of money. And we're excited to see the changes that it's making. And we're excited to see what the future has to hold. If the math holds out on how all this is supposed to work.
I agree. I think with that being in mind, then where could the listeners find you at?
I think this got cut off last time, but we have Instagram that we're pretty active on. We do have Facebook. We also have a website, which is www.swfrc.com. And then we actually work, which you may be interested, Ryan, in speaking with them, choplocal.com. So they host like a web store for small farms and ranches. It's a community farmers market. I'm sure you've seen some of that stuff popping up, but they've been super receptive and super cool. And their little online ordering system is really efficient. We've been very happy with it. So they'll go to our website, or they can find us on choplocal.com, and they can order from that store. And then we ship west of the Rockies, and we ship west of the Rockies for two reasons. One, if you're in Georgia, I would rather you bought from a farm in Georgia or in, you know what I mean? I don't need to be touching Florida. I don't need to be touching Ohio. There's plenty of business for us here on the western side of the United States. So we ship Texas to Montana and west, right? Because that's our territory. That's what we understand. And also just because it keeps the cost of shipping more reasonable, because that Sierra Nevada mountain range is a huge barrier with transportation, and it costs a lot to get stuff over that mountain. But yeah, they can find us at swfrc.com, or just look up sweetwaterfarmandranch.com, or find us on choplocal.com. But yeah, we should also get you a box of stuff to try, man. I think you'd be really happy with it.
For sure. No, we can definitely talk after this, because I would love that. And then I'll also make sure to include all of that too in the description notes too. But I guess with that being said, thank you for joining me, Sam.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ryan.
Visit www.theregenaissance.co to learn more.